And welcome into the NPR-inspired smooth jazz stylings of Basketball by Association. I'm your host, Joel Cordes, joined by the ever-jazzy Dan Lewig. As we talk the Northwest Division preview, because we're getting ready for the beginning of the NBA season. Dan, I'm glad to have you back in the co-host seat with me, and we're talking about a division near and dear to both of our hearts, which include our collectively favorite team, but we're not going to homer this one too hard because there's a lot of good basketball played in this division and a lot of arch rivals that you and I really respect and love watching too.
Absolutely. And looking forward to diving through, just getting a recap. I can't believe the season is talking season preview time already, but fall is here. We have games not that far off within it and training camp. And before you know it, the regular season kicks in. So ready or not, here we are.
Yeah. And, we start with the Northwest Division because, well, they finished with the worst record collectively, or at least top of the division compared to everybody else. The division winner, the Utah Jazz, had 49 wins last year. We're going to re-rank all the teams with our predictions. We're going to look at the biggest offseason moves, the things we like, don't like, give them our prognostication. But of course, before we do that, we have to name an episode or name the episode after a player, which has been a convention that we've done ever since the beginning. It used to be based on player numbers. Now that we're up to episode 117, because that's what this is, we've been doing career playoff games. But oddly enough, there is no player in NBA history or ABA history, or even combined NBA and ABA history, with exactly 117 career playoff games. So I had to really get a little oddball with this one, but I like the pick. We're going the player that is ranked 117th on the all-time career regular season games list. That keeps it notably obscure enough, but a guy, hey, if you're 117th on the list, you still are somebody that people are going to know. So this is the Rashard Lewis episode. Rashard Lewis, of course, coming in as a 19-year-old at the very end of the 90s, the 98-99 season with the Seattle Supersonics. Played 9 seasons in Seattle with the likes of Ray Allen, Brent Barry, and a lot of not so great players as the Supersonics kind of edged their way literally out of the city. But then he played it 3 seasons in Orlando, 3.5 seasons in Orlando, went to an all-star game there as he had done in Seattle, went to the NBA Finals as a front court mate with Dwight Howard and Hedo Turkoglu, Jameer Nelson, of course, on that team as well. Did a couple seasons in Washington. And then, a lot of people forget this, but he won an NBA championship with the Miami Heat. He was a member of the Heatles for 2 years. So Rashard Lewis, 2-time All-Star, 2013 NBA champ. This one's for you, buddy. And so we're going to move from Seattle quite a bit southeast to the team that wound up number 1 in the Northwest Division last year. I don't think they're going to wind up number 1 again, Dan Lewig, but the Utah Jazz had 49 wins. And if you're just catching up on the NBA and you've somehow been in a cave, they were at the center, the heart of a lot of different things. Rudy Gobert moved to the Timberwolves, a massive deal that brought back like 4 players, 4 draft picks, multiple pick swaps. Donovan Mitchell gets moved to the Cleveland Cavaliers, handful of young players, 3 first-round picks, couple of pick swaps as well.
And the rights to Connolly's next born kid.
Right. And a new coach, of course, too. It's not just that they blew up the foundation, but you've got Will Hardy coming over from the Boston Celtics, where he was an assistant. You've got the Boston Celtics connection as Danny Ainge taking over with a loud voice in the front office there. Dan, let's just get down to the nitty-gritty here. What did you like and not like about an offseason that for the Jazz, by the way, is not done yet, because it's rumored very strongly that veterans Mike Conley and Bojan Bogdanovic and Jordan Clarkson are all probably not going to be in a Utah Jazz uniform by the time that training camp begins, which is pretty much like right now almost. So maybe by the time training camp ends, or at least early in the season, I don't know, but they're not going to be there.
And those that are even there now, if they have a good first half, or someone doesn't get traded at this point, then they're still on pace to not finish the season with the team as well. So there's still going to be a chance for some moves. Could be dependent upon any early training camp or early preseason injuries in that regard that could factor or influence that within it. But what I at least will say, if you're going to blow up an organization, wouldn't you agree that they did it the right way? I mean, you had your two big marketable stars. If you were going to go down this path, could you envision a scenario that was better than what they did?
No, because while I like the Rudy Gobert trade to the Minnesota Timberwolves, and we'll get to that in a little bit, and while I don't think those first-round picks, as you and I talked about quite a bit after the trade went down, I don't think those are going to be top-flight first-round picks. You still got 4 of them, and you still got all of the pick swaps. I don't think Rudy Gobert was technically worth all that. Donovan Mitchell worth 3 first-round picks from a Cavs organization that's probably going to be really competitive over the next few seasons while he's there. Again, these are not going to be lights out picks for them, but you still got 3 and some pick swaps. Is Donovan Mitchell worth that? I think 3 picks for him is the high side. 4 for Gobert is kind of ridiculous, but it is a multi-time defensive player of the year. So you are right. Doing it the right way. And as I look at this roster, knowing that Conley, Clarkson, and Bogdanovich are all probably going to be gone for at least another prospect-ish type of guy and or a middling to low first-round draft pick. The Jazz will have so much to be able to cobble together, and I really do actually like the collection of youngsters that they have. I don't know if they have a superstar out of any of them, and that's what you need in this league, but you have a lot of prospects with some star capability and the type of roster that could wind up under a young up-and-coming head coach like Will Hardy being a lot more versatile, a lot more plucky than people realize, and the kind of team that hovers around 35 to 40 wins and is a really tough out for people, to the point that the Jazz have to mysteriously start shutting people down near the end of the year because they don't want to actually be that good in the long run. And here's where I want to start of the things that I like. That backcourt, Colin Sexton, Malik Beasley, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and then you throw in Talon Horton-Tucker too, coming over from the Los Angeles Lakers in the trade that sent our good buddy Patrick Beverley from the Jazz, where he never appeared, over to Los Angeles. I like those 4 players. I think they fit together in a couple of interesting pairings. The one that I'm really intrigued to see is Alexander Walker and Malik Beasley. Alexander Walker 6'5", Beasley 6'4". Beasley's a little bit short for a shooting guard, but he's a guy in Minnesota that you and I watched for the last couple of years going, this dude's going to be a starter. He deserves a starting spot. And we began to get a little bit worried as Anthony Edwards rightfully took that spot in Minnesota to go, Beasley's going to look for a bigger role. And right now, Beasley is one of the better three-point shooters, both volume and percentage-wise, over the last couple seasons. This is his shot. This is his chance to be in a starting backcourt, get all the minutes he can handle, all the shots he can handle. This team is going to need his scoring. And Alexander Walker is kind of a 5-tool, jack of all trades, master of none. I kind of see, I don't want to be insulting, but a poor man's DeJounte Murray a little bit. I really have liked him, and I don't understand why he's bounced around early in his career. I like this a lot. I love that backcourt. The thing I don't like is that Colin Sexton by default is going to be the starting point guard. And it's not that I hate Colin Sexton or anything like that. But what I've seen from Sexton in Cleveland, where he was a starting guard with Darius Garland, is a guy who I think is going to be best suited career-wise as a 6th man. And the Jazz, having kind of made him the headliner in the Cavs trade, I think he's going to wind up being the starter next to Beasley. I'm not crazy about that fit. I love Sexton and Horton-Tucker off the bench in the second unit, maybe even doing a split, an even split with the starters. I just don't think that's going to happen. And that's where I'm not crazy about it, but I knew they had to do it.
Yeah, I from even a fantasy perspective, I think I would be watching very carefully Malik Beasley. That's someone that's going to have, because he's going to get all the playing time he wants. We already know that even on a more competitive team, he has done it before. He's going to get a chance without any expectations to just go and play. And I think that's He already is an excellent 3-point shooter within it. He's going to get his opportunities within it. You have the hustle squad that's going to be here with Jared Vanderbilt. I mean, you have guys that are going to be at least interesting to watch. Like I appreciate that you already went out and said this isn't going to be an overran or a dumpster fire of a team where it's a gimme win going in. You're going to have to play hard. Walker Kessler was still highly thought of within it. We don't know how much, rookies progress at different rates. Centers especially can be that way, but defense and rebounding and Vanderbilt within it, scoring with Sexton and Beasley. Again, it's not a deep team by any means, but it has more talent on it than I think people might be thinking about out of the gate. And pursuing a potential 500 record within that is not out of the realm of possibility.
Yeah, not deep, but deep enough for a team filled with youngsters who are going to get as many minutes as they can handle. I think they've got enough in that second unit. And we haven't mentioned Lauri Markkanen yet, who, again, this is a guy who's been traded multiple times now in his young career. I don't think we're going to see, the second coming of Dirk Nowitzki, which is what everybody thought when he was originally drafted. But that's okay. Markkanen did show in Cleveland that he could be a starter in this league, that he could knock down shots, that he needed to be insulated on the defensive end, but that he wasn't a complete pushover and liability on that side. This is where I like the addition of Jared Vanderbilt. I like the fact that Walker Kessler is there as a defense-first guy, full stop. Udoka Azubuike showed some signs last year for Utah as well. I like that group of bigs, and I like the fact that the three other guys are more defensively inclined, which is going to allow Markkanen to theoretically stay on the floor longer, especially when Walker should be a decent defender, Horton Tucker should be a decent defender, and I've got to feel like probably whoever they get back in one of these three trades, they're going to go that defensive route again as well. You've got your offensive three set. Sexton, Beasley, and Markkanen are going to be your top three scorers. That's the way it should be. Everybody else of the young guys that we've mentioned, they can score, but they're probably more in that 10 to 12 point range on most decent nights, depending on the amount of minutes that they get. So I like the idea of Markkanen and Vanderbilt in the same front court together, even though you don't have a true traditional center there. Vanderbilt played undersized a lot last year and having to cover for Karl Anthony Towns, another guy who not the world's greatest defender, even though he was much improved last year, but Vanderbilt was really that motor and was a high steal and high block guy. And I know we're standing for our former Timberwolves here, but there's a lot to like. Is there anything out of this offseason that you did not like before we make our predictions?
I think it's the double-edged sword of what we just said, looking at the flip side of that. For this to be successful, ideally you want at least one season really down there to try to get a top 5 pick. I mean, I think you're looking for impact within it as well as volume. And there's a chance this team could be almost too competitive if you're wanting to truly tank. And so I think the question comes, do you end up doing too good of a job, but not good enough of a job where you get stuck in that limbo mode? And I think that's the real question of the future of this franchise is how are you going to build this if you don't have a top 5 pick? And I hope they've wrestled with that. Otherwise, you have some other players you have to trade if you're not ready to answer that question.
I look at Colin Sexton's long-term upside, and I see a guy who might make an all-star game or two. But high side could be a multi-time 6th man of the year if he's able to slot into that right role. I don't see Beasley as a multi-time all-star. I don't see Lauri Markkanen as a multi-time all-star. I see them as guys who, can get you 20 points a game. But in today's high-scoring NBA, 20 points a game is not a guarantee for an all-star berth like it used to be. It just isn't. So you're absolutely right. If that plethora of picks that they have, if they're unable to trade up and hit on a couple of them to get the true multi-time all-stars, that, truth be told, they had in Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert, to be able to replace that. You're right. This could be a limbo team that needs to be torn down yet again going forward. We know Utah is not going to finish first. Do they finish last in the division or better than that, do you think?
That's a great question as we talk about, and might even be a great segue within that as we consider questions with what level is Oklahoma City at within this? It's going to be. It's not. Let's put it this way: to answer your question, it's not a guarantee they finish last, and then that gets into the again the conversations that had to be had once you committed to trading Gobert and Mitchell. Where's the how does it look when you climb out the other side, and what do you need in order to do that? And then you need to decide here within it if you end up being too good in the first half, how much are you trading to scale down to try to get there in the second half? If that is the way you're going. If it's not, if you're saying no, we're good with the middle picks, we trust our development team to at least get solid players, and we think that as we build a solid team, we can use those picks and other things to get someone else's disgruntled star when we're ready. You just have to already have those conversations and know what you want to do within that to have the direction ready to go. Otherwise, you end up in that limbo mode that's not going to get you anywhere.
We haven't touched on the fact that the Utah Jazz are the rumored frontrunner for a Russell Westbrook trade, which would send Bojan Bogdanovic to the Lakers and take Westbrook off of the Lakers' hands. It's a next to zero possibility that Russ ever suits up in a Jazz uniform. He may be paid to stay away, but I'm going to go on record that regardless of whether that happens or not, Utah will not finish last in the division, and they have the upside to possibly even finish third, though that would probably not be exactly where Danny Ainge and company, as you've said, actually wants them to be. Let's move to the next team on the list, a team that, if things had gone the way they were supposed to have gone, should have been the number one team, not only in the division, but there were a few people on record, including Archie Shea, who Archie is not with us today. And by the way, Archie, this is why both of us are drinking on camera, because you're not here. Archie Shea was on record as predicting them to quite possibly win the West, which he's done for the last couple seasons, and for good reason. It's the Denver Nuggets, and Dan Lewig, despite the fact that really their legs were cut out from them as far as a contender goes, with Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. missing ostensibly the entirety of the season. They were still a competitive team throughout because Nikola Jokic was just that good. And Michael Porter Jr. should be back at full strength. Jamal Murray wants to start ramping up in preseason, is the last word that we've heard, and expects to play this year. They've gone out. They have swung a couple of trades to try to consolidate that bench, which was an issue last year. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope will take over the starting shooting guard spot for Will Barton, who's gone. Bones Highland is going to get promoted, likely to the backup point guard spot or backup swingman, depending, because you've got Ish Smith in the mix. Big time get for them. Bruce Brown comes over from the Brooklyn Nets as a free agent. Brown was arguably the Nets' second best player last year, behind Kevin Durant, and really a guy who is just a gap filler and a phenomenal defender. They've still got Aaron Gordon and Jeff Green up front. Nikola Jokic is still, an MVP caliber player. Tell me what you like about this team and anything that worries you, because as of right now, we should be talking about them as a championship contender in the Western Conference, but most people are not because of what happened last year.
If you can't do it with Jokic, there's major questions, and you can only talk about injuries for so long before you have to question the nucleus that you have. At some point, you have to count on people being on the court, and if you still need time for this one figuring out, you're putting prime ages. That window is built upon this at some point, and you're going to start getting past that peak time that you want if this doesn't start turning around soon. The things you like, again, I fully agree that Brown being an excellent addition to the team, and being able to I like the guards and for element to what they've added to, they've always had a strong, deep team. They've added the right strategic moves to keep that there despite some of the people changing. The concern is what happens if Jokic goes down. There isn't big man depth here, and I think that's the biggest concern. You might be able to sustain without Murray, or trying to figure out if Michael Porter getting his health going within. There's ways you can plug there. you don't have anything to plug if Jokic goes down.
You absolutely do not, because we've failed to mention here that DeMarcus Cousins is gone in free agency, and we have yet another guy from the mid-aughts, a former All-Star who is well past his prime, much more so than Cousins even, DeAndre Jordan, who, frankly, I am astounded that he is still in the league, because over the last couple of seasons, he's been gifted roles on various teams, whether contending teams, whether it was the Nets or the Sixers or the Lakers, and has washed out of every single one of those. I don't think he has gas left in the tank, even as a low minute guy anymore. And you're right. That is the crack in the armor. And it's easy to say that when you've got an MVP caliber player. I mean, if Giannis Antetokounmpo goes down, or Joel Embiid goes down, or Luka Doncic goes down, their teams are screwed. We know that. But there really is nothing backing up Jokic in Denver. And I think there is a little bit being taken for granted that he's been fairly durable over the beginning of his career. And you're right about the other guys. Jamal Murray was very durable until this injury, but it's been a long time in recovery. And we don't know what we're going to get, although Murray's game is not necessarily predicated on blazing athleticism that you got to necessarily worry about. It's Porter Jr., though, that you're concerned about, because the back issues were there at Missouri in college. He had season truncated there. He's had issues in the NBA multiple times. And Bruce Brown is a completely different player. He's not the scorer that Porter Jr. is. Aaron Gordon, I like as a starter. I think Gordon is a starting caliber guy, but Gordon is long past the upside point where people thought he might be a multi-time all-star in Orlando. He is what he is, a solid starter who can finish some plays for you. Jeff Green is a solid veteran who can finish some plays for you. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, good defender. I'm glad he's going to be the second best defender on this team, not the first, and that Brown gets to take that role. I think that's perfect for them. But if you're asking Pope to score 18 points a game, you are in a lot of trouble. Maybe Bones Highland in his sophomore or junior season here is able to take that step up. He showed flashes. He scored like 10 points a game in 19 minutes per game last year. There's the possibility, but Denver needs that clear-cut third guy. And as you said, they absolutely need Nikola Jokic to stay healthy. Now, best case scenario, those guys all do stay healthy. Is this team good enough as presently constructed to not only make it out of the West, which perennially is very, very tough and will be again, are they good enough to win a championship?
If Murray can come back healthy by the end of the season, right? As we're talking about, this team is less reliant on health at the beginning, depending upon Jokic, obviously, but it's what do you have at the end? Do you have your top talent available then? Then yes, this team has the thing is we just haven't been able to see it, right? It hasn't been able to be on the court. I want to see the core of this team going into the deep run in the playoffs and see what can be done within it. You have guys that are reaching their absolute peak with what Jokic has done in back-to-back seasons. You have, if you could have had the other guys with it. So this is also a team that I believe will be very aggressive at the deadline. If you need that second big man or a move within it, this is getting closer to time to push in all chips. They've been very good at keeping great depth within it, but is Bones Highland the X factor because of him taking the next step up on the court for them, or is he the X factor that can be used to get someone else as things go? So I'm definitely interested to see what they do between now and the deadline.
I will say this. This is Mike Malone's last chance in Denver to get them to a conference finals, maybe even an NBA finals. And that's no knock against Malone, who's been there already for almost like a decade now, and has helped put together some very competitive Denver Nuggets teams. And they've had some bad breaks. They've also had a couple of playoff rounds where they came back down 3-1 and battled and showed us some things. And but the truth is, they haven't gotten to that promised land. You're right about windows in the NBA. Nikola Jokic has shown that he can be your best player on the floor, but he is that unique type of best player, much like your boy Kevin Garnett, you're wearing the t-shirt, was, where he could anchor certain things about your team and be the best, but he needed a closer. He needed somebody else to take those final shots and to be that guy. And for Garnett, he was at his best when it was a Paul Pierce, when it was maybe a Ray Allen, when it was a Sam Cassell and a Latrell Sprewell, when he had those guys. Jokic has shown, as wonderfully talented offensively as he is, he operates best as your hub, but he needs a Jamal Murray as that cold-blooded assassin shooter at the end of the game to work his way in to take those shots, and to have Michael Porter Jr. or Gordon or whoever it is as those other outlets and those other things, so that Jokic can manipulate the game, but he still essentially is a delivery system. It's the way that I've referred to guys like Rajon Rondo and Ricky Rubio and those pass first point guards, LeBron James even. LeBron James is a delivery system. Luka Doncic is the same way, but has enough of that scoring acumen, and LeBron obviously has enough of it too, that you're fine with those guys taking the last shot of the game. So I agree. I think the upside is this team could get to an NBA Finals. They're going to need a lot of breaks to go their way to do it. I am picking them to be the winner of the Northwest Division, which is a tough thing to do given the next team that we're going to talk about. But I am doing it because I think this is kind of a make or break year, where the next thing that happens is if they don't perform up to expectations, even if there are injuries, as Malone goes. And then you're probably a year away from a full retooling around Jokic that may include Porter Jr. going, and depending on Jamal Murray's health, there could be some tough questions there. Let's move on to the next team near and dear to our hearts. You and I shared a show that pretty much just broke down the trade between the Jazz and the Timberwolves with Rudy Gobert coming aboard, so we won't recap all that. But Minnesota last year finally was competitive, finally made the NBA playoffs, and was an exciting, fun team to watch throughout. 46 wins, lose in a phenomenally tough first-round series with the Memphis Grizzlies, who we hope we see again. They probably hope they see Minnesota again. Fans on either side of those teams and just anywhere in the NBA have got to hope that those two teams match up again. But the beautiful thing about this, and we'll get to Memphis when we get to the Southwest Division, but it's true for them and it's true for Minnesota. For both of those teams, their best days are still quite a bit ahead of them. And better days are coming already this next season. I'm going to give you the floor first just to talk about the grand overview of why this is an exciting time to be a Minnesota Timberwolves fan. And you and I have been fans for a long time, and it has been a long time. Kevin Love era, Jimmy Butler stopping by notwithstanding.
Nice
it's
cameo.
It's been a long time since you could be this excited about the Minnesota Timberwolves.
I will say this, as you're mentioning it in the same breath with Memphis, is that any Minnesota fan can thank or hate Memphis as the catalyst for the direction they went this offseason. They got punched in the face with that series. And that was the final clincher, already knowing that there just wasn't enough interior presence. But that was the exclamation point of saying, we don't have it. We cannot compete in this manner with it. And it showed abundantly. And so what did they do? They went out and got the best player available to match that, to put the physicality there, to put a defensive presence there. If that was the major issue, they solved it in the best way they can. Now, can they make it work? Will that work? Will the Twin Towers emerge as an option that works not only in the regular season, but can that get you deep in the postseason? Those are two separate questions. I think Minnesota is going to win a lot of games this year.
And have a lot of highlights, too, because of this Anthony Edwards guy we'll get to in a minute.
But he's the reason, if they make it to if it's a deep postseason run, it's not going to be because of Cat. It's not going to be because of Gobert. It's going to be because Edwards is ready. They will go as far as he can take them. They offer something unique with the Twin Towers, but they need to have that guy at the end where Edwards needs to fully supplant Russell as the guy taking the shot at the end. If he's ready for that, this team can go a long ways. And he's going to get through. The question is it this year? As far as how ready are they to take that next step. Plus, anytime you have such a major change, such a major overhaul, that doesn't gel immediately. That takes time to do, which is why I'm picking Denver as well to finish above Minnesota, because they've been together longer. Even with some of the supporting cast changes, they're more ready for that. I expect Timberwolves to be good. I think the Towns-Gobert combo is good in the regular season, and where the rubber meets the road is going to be in the postseason. But an underrated signing to me is the Kyle Anderson move.
A Memphis Grizzly, by the way.
Yeah. If you can't beat him, join him type of situation, or bring him on board. And the additional moves that they've made just make a ton of sense. And so obviously I'm a fan, as we talked before, of Gobert, but I like the supporting cast moves done within it. And we'll see what happens here. But I guess I flip that back to you. Do you agree with that assessment that as far as deep run into postseason is reliant on Edwards?
In the grand scheme of things, absolutely. Because he not only has to be an all-star, he's got to be the end game taker, but he's got to be the guy that controls the game throughout. Anthony Edwards last year, we saw him get hot. We saw him have unbelievable performances. We saw the athleticism. We saw all the pieces there. Anthony Edwards did not always control the game from a start to finish aspect. And if he did have a game like that, he had trouble stringing together multiple games in a row. Even though the stats were all there, the plays were all there, he was a positive contributor on both ends of the floor. I see a guy who has a lot to learn yet as a defender, but the tools are all there, and the will is there too. And the technique's not terrible, unlike Russell and Cat, where we saw the desire to be better, finally. And we saw the effort even there, but the technique was still pretty terrible. But Anthony Edwards, he's got it. He's got it, and all the reports are there. So, yeah, he's got to be the lead guy. He's got to be one of the 5 best players in the Western Conference next year without it really even being a thought. And that's a big ask, but you're right. I do think the Twin Towers has to be feasible in late game situations because you got a couple of big egos involved. Cat says the right things, but he also knows he's a really good player, and he's been the guy who has suffered through some pretty tough seasons in Minnesota. He's been the guy that they've built around. Gobert, we know, has an ego. We saw it in Utah. He's earned it as a defensive player of the year. He's earned it as an Olympian and a Team France guy that has been very, very successful. But if one of those guys is being constantly sat at the end of games, I don't think that's going to sit well with that player. So it's kind of got to work. And we see how it can work. We also see how it couldn't. The good news is, team-wise, that Minnesota has a lot of undersized 4s to slot into whoever plays that 5 spot during the stretch of the game, because I don't think you're going to see Towns and Gobert playing mega minutes together unless it really just clicks in a way we're not really even anticipating. Kyle Anderson can play undersized 4, or he's a big 3. Ditto with Jaden McDaniels. Ditto with Taurean Prince. Eric Pascal is a guy who may not make it out of camp, but has shown some flashes with the Golden State Warriors. And then with the Jazz last year as a scoring guy, not quite as tall as the others, but can play some undersized 4, and is kind of a beefy 3, depending on where you want to put him. The Wolves have plenty of depth in their backcourt. Bryn Forbes and Austin Rivers are kind of replacement level guys, let's just be honest. But they're solid, and they don't make a ton of mistakes. Jordan McLaughlin and Jalen Noel, on the other hand, have paid their dues and have earned backup spots and have been very efficient at what they do. And it is more than deserving of them to get those crack at minutes. And if for some reason they can't handle it, you've got some vets in Rivers and Forbes that can soak up some of those minutes. So Minnesota was a deep team last year. They're a deep team this year. They're a tougher team this year on paper. They are with Edwards and Towns especially, but then you've got Russell as that third wheel, but Noel could be that third wheel on certain nights. Other guys collectively might be able to add up to being your third wheel. Rudy Gobert can still give you 20 points on certain evenings too. Like, there's a lot of different options to be that third guy where I don't think Minnesota has to sink or swim on the nights that D'Angelo Russell inexplicably goes 3 for 18, because those nights do happen, right? But that's oftentimes the night that Russell also hits the game-winning shot when he was 3 for 18 and still had the guts to take that shot. So I'm okay with Russell being the starting point guard, even though McLaughlin might make some sense given the way this is going and the punch that Russell could bring off the bench. But Russell is a willing passer, and he's an excellent pick and roll guy, and that is going to play well with Rudy Gobert. But you might see Russell and Gobert start the games, then get subbed out real early so that they can come back with the second unit, which is how D'Lo got handled last year in Minnesota. My question for you, I guess a two-part question. Is there anything you don't like about this team? And we both have picked them to finish behind Denver. I'm going to say it's not by much. It's like a game or game and a half that Minnesota finishes into second place. Do you see that as more or less? And anything you don't like?
Yeah, I'd say that I agree with this will be going down to the wire. I think this is going to be a fun division title race. And I think that's going to be something exciting to see. It's going to draw a larger spotlight on does this Twin Tower thing work or how well it works, as well as if Edwards is ready to take that spotlight as well. So I think those are all good questions and good things to see. So I'm in agreement that it's going to be a neck and neck race within it. And to be honest, if it's not, there's going to be, it's because there's too many on the pairing of the two big men together. And that leads to my biggest concern. My biggest concern that I have within it is Cat's foul tendencies acting as a 4 when he's on the court with Gobert. He's got the athleticism to do it, but he sometimes has the issues with fouls. We've already seen that, and now you're pushing him more into that position where those tendencies will be exposed that much more if he doesn't have good technique. And you already said at the beginning, the willingness is there, but what's his biggest struggle? The technique. That has
he is slow-footed. Let's just be real. He is slow-footed. He's got heavy feet when he moves, and he's got a high center of gravity. And those two things kill him. And you might not be able to fix slow feet. You absolutely can fix high center of gravity, and that is yet to be fixed, right? Along with the reaching and the times that he gets frustrated and, just gets out of his head.
And the part of that is by good anticipation. Because if you can't move fast, you already have to begin moving where you need to go beforehand. There's different ways you can compensate for that, and so that's one. But also you do have one of the best defenders in the league back there. If a guy starts to get by you, don't do something dumb to compound it. Rely on your teammate. You actually have someone you can rely on now. Utilize that, and I think that's a mindset thing. And so if he starts to get that or grasp that, then it'll be okay if he ends up a step behind with how they do things. It's a matter of don't do something dumb after making compounding the dumb, I think is the way that I describe it.
I love that point. He's Dan Lewig. I'm Joel Cordes. This is Basketball by Association. We are breaking down the Northwest Division. If you want to see the video version of the show, you can find us on YouTube. Like, share, subscribe, ring the bell over there. If you want the audio-only version, Spreaker, Spotify, iTunes, wherever you get your podcast, that's where you will find us. Let's move down to fourth place.
I have a face for radio, so.
Well, here we go. Well, cheers to that. Fourth division in the Northwest, or fourth place in the Northwest Division, was the Portland Trailblazers last year. On paper, they should have been a lot better, but unfortunately, on paper, Damian Lillard was only healthy for a very, very short time of last season, and then they began to tear things down during the year. CJ McCollum was gone. There was multiple trades made, bringing in some young guys. They wound up being not good, but not bad enough to get a high draft pick. And I'm going to go on record as saying when I look at this starting five, I really, really like it. Damian Lillard, Anthony Simons finally gets his chance, although I don't know if Simons is actually a shooting guard, but they're going to slot him next to Lillard. Simons is a little bit bigger than CJ McCollum was, a little bit better defender. Josh Hart, a guy I really like as a five-tool veteran. I'm not sure that Josh Hart is a starter on a middling team, but I think Josh Hart could be your 5th starter on a really good team where you could hide him and just let him fill in those gaps. Portland trades for Jeremy Grant from Detroit, which was incredibly disappointing because Jeremy Grant would have been really fun in Minnesota, or would have been really fun in Atlanta, or a lot of different places. And here in Portland, it feels like he goes from an afterthought Pistons team to a team that we'll get to in a second that is kind of on the verge of being an afterthought in Portland, because I don't think this is sustainable. There's a spoiler alert. And here's the big one for me. I'm going to jump the gun and tell you what I don't like. I do not like that they kept Yusuf Nurkic in a offseason where I know they're trying to do one more go-round with Lillard, and that's what last year was supposed to be, but then Lillard got hurt. So it's a retooling. But I look up and down this bench, and I am not confident. I am horrified if any of these key 5 guys get hurt. And that's no disrespect to Gary Payton Jr., the second, who did very good things in Golden State. I have a feeling that Gary Payton Jr. is going to be one of those classic guys who got handed money in a bigger role and might be a little bit overexposed. Nasir Little is a guy that I really, really like, and probably could have been the starter this year for a Portland team if they were doing a full rebuild. He had injury issues last year. He's going to start behind Jeremy Grant. That's it. That's your 7 guys. Because Keon Johnson, Shadion Sharp, they got a long ways to go and a lot to show. Greg Brown showed some stuff last year. Justice Winslow, his career is hanging on by a thread. Former lottery pick. Drew Eubanks is a filler guy at best coming from the San Antonio Spurs. This is not a deep team. It is a team that has a handful of guys in Nurkic and Grant and Lillard who have had some major injury issues. They could look real good for 20 games. Really good. And as soon as that first injury issue hits, this is the classic type of team that could go off the rails fast. And I almost feel like the Portland Trailblazers built themselves up to blow themselves up before this is all said and done.
How do you rate that in regards of this gets laid at Chauncey Billups' feet? Is he going to give him a chance to have a fair shake at this for things that are beyond coaching ability control? As far as like the injuries and durability and guys that are starting to get older, you're going to be, we're seeing the dings and dents already coming within it, especially for point guards. So if someone misses 20, 30 games or more, and this goes the way that you want, or not the way that you want, but the way that it could, how does that impact their head coach?
I think it will be very easy after 2 seasons, if they miss the playoffs both times, to oust Chauncey Billups. I said this last year. I thought last year should have been Lillard's last season in Portland. I would love to see him play his entire career as a Blazer. Would love it. But the trajectory that team is on is not great. And Lillard deserves something better at this point in his career. They've had some really good teams. It's kind of a Garnett type of situation. He's given his heart and soul to that team. They've had some good teams. They've had some middling teams. They've had some disappointments. But it's clearly on the downswing, and they don't have the capital, whether as a free agent destination or current group of picks or current group of upside young guys, to really feel confident in a brighter future in time for Damian Lillard. So, yeah, Portland deserves Lillard for his entire career. Lillard deserves Portland for his entire career. That would be a beautiful story. Kudos to him if he decides to do it. He's intimated at that before. But in a lot of ways, Damian Lillard deserves better, too. And so I felt last year should have been his last season. And I'm going to go on record as saying I think this is his last season in Portland, because there are a ton of red flags. And a guy like Jeremy Grant, a guy like Josh Hart, Nurkic to a much lesser extent because he is a prototypical traditional old school center with not a ton of stretchiness. He's not a great defender, but he puts up some decent points and rebounding numbers. But all 3 of those guys are going to be very, very desirable at the trade deadline if this goes south. There will be teams that are contending that would love to pick those guys up. Lillard will bring in a big haul. Somebody will pair him with another superstar and give that chance as long as he's healthy. Anthony Simons is the lone guy along with Peyton and probably somebody like Keon Johnson and Nasir Little. They would be left behind as part of a rebuild. Unless they really show out this year, they're not good enough to bring back that other star that Portland needs. But they're not necessarily good enough in the long term to look at that and go, yeah, that's going to be the guy next to Lillard that puts them over the top. And the fact that the bench keeps eroding further and further and further into rebuild territory is where you have, again, that classic stereotypical team that is stuck going in two different directions. They just won't admit it yet. So
this is a relationship that they're giving excuses of why to stay later at work and not spending time together. The relationship's over. They just haven't admitted it to each other yet. But I'll ask this question. If things break right, if they're healthy this year, if it actually happens for them, what's your win prediction for them? What can they do if health is on their side?
If health is on their side, the best they can do is to finish third in the division, which is what happened last year during a disaster season. They have the potential to get in as a 7th or 8th seed, which has happened a handful of times in Lillard's career when they've been really good, but the rest of the West was just that much better. And do they have a chance to be an upset special because Lillard is that good? Sure. We've seen them push people as a 7th or 8th seed, and they've gotten in higher than that as well. I know they were the 3rd seed, a couple of times or whatever too, but like 6th seed in there as well. We've seen them flame out in the playoffs just as many times as we've seen them do some amazing things. So I just don't think the ceiling is that much higher than it was. Now, would they have a winning record, whereas last year was a losing record? Yeah, absolutely. And I guess last year they were 4th in the division. I should correct myself, not 3rd. But they're not going to finish ahead of Minnesota. They're not going to finish ahead of Denver. You would need like the entire starting lineups of those teams to get hurt for lengthy periods of time and Portland to stay completely healthy and somebody to come out of the woodwork, whether it's Shadion Sharp or whatever, to be that classic like Kawhi Leonard, Paul George type of guy where you go, whoa, where was this? How did we not see this coming? They would need that to happen. And still, maybe they could finish ahead of one of those teams in that scenario, but they're not going to finish ahead of both. Like, it is what it is. And I like your analogy.
I think the question becomes, do you want to be competitive or do you want to be relevant? Lillard makes you competitive. Doesn't necessarily make you relevant anymore within. And so that becomes like, what are you looking for? Just enough to be profitable, have at least a competitive, maybe a chance to get into the playoffs. Is that enough for you right now? Is that what you're doing? Because that's the true question. Do you want to be competitive or do you want to be relevant? They're good with one. They're not with the other. And if that's what they want, then competitive is now being counterproductive to what you want to do.
Last year, when we got to the Oklahoma City Thunder, who we predicted to be at the bottom of the division, we literally spent a grand total of about 90 seconds on them. We said they're a G League team. It's going to get ugly. There's a couple of players we like. They're going to be competitive and surprise some people on a few nights. They did that. They beat the Lakers a couple of times last year. They surprised some people. They also, on a couple of occasions, looked a little bit too good for an Oklahoma City team that was clearly trying to tank. And so they miraculously started shutting down guys like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who really should not have been shut down when they were last year. I'm going to give them more than 90 seconds of floor time this year because not only were they more respectable last season, despite having multiple like 40 and 50 point losses on certain nights, which is what we also predicted, they continued to fight. They were never a team that packed it in. They were never a team that stopped trying to play hard and the way they wanted to play. And we saw the flashes of certain players where you saw what the front office is seeing and what they're trying to build. And you see an all-NBA defender in Lou Dort. You see the 5-tool backcourt of guys that legit could win a couple of or could be multi-time all-stars in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Josh Giddey, despite the fact that they're positionless, but they are big guards who do it all. and can play together. You saw Darius Baisley as potentially an NBA starter at the power forward position. You saw Alexei Pokusevski as the unicorn type of Euro big that is so hard to actually nail down and have happen in real life, but he might be what they see. He's just 19 pounds and 19 years old, right? But that stuff can be fixed. And then you saw them swing for the fences on draft day with Chet Holmgren, who that's exactly the type of pick that if you're the Oklahoma City Thunder, you take. You don't take the safe guy. You take the swing for the fences guy, because if it doesn't work, you've got other blue chippers that you can build off of. And if Chet Holmgren just turns into a rotation player with a really unique skill set, a Kristaps Porzingis type of guy, you can live with that. And if he flames out, you're still on the verge of tanking anyway to continue getting picks. And you've got so many picks. You can cover those multitude of sins. So on draft night, we said Orlando was not a good spot. Houston was not a good spot for Holmgren because they needed a guy to pan out right away. Oklahoma City doesn't need that. Well, spoiler alert, Holmgren's not going to pan out right away because he's hurt and is going to be a classic red shirt type of guy like Blake Griffin and Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid and all of these high, first round draft picks that didn't get to play their rookie year. We could debate endlessly about whether Holmgren had any business playing in a pickup game like that. That's a different show. But you can't hate what Oklahoma City is doing here, even if they're bad. And I don't think they're going to be as bad. I think they're going to be, again, a team that gets a little too good too fast, and they start mysteriously shutting guys down because they have to.
So I have two questions for you as a result of that as we look at this young roster. Number one, there has been emphasis on Holmgren and a lot of things that surround it, but what about Ousmane Dieng and Jalen Williams? Which of those two do you like more for having a bigger one for bigger impact now? Do you see them as part of a nucleus? Like, how does this fit with what they're trying to do? What is your thoughts on those two players?
So you know me, and I'm the first to admit this, not only on this show, but any of the shows that I guest on. I am not an NBA draft guy. I'm not a college basketball guy or a prospect guy. I don't make my judgment until I see these guys on the floor and I get about 20 games with them at the NBA level. So I'm going to punt on that one because I honestly don't know. And Oklahoma City is such a shifting sands situation right now where we saw with Pokusevski last year, there were certain nights that he'd get 30 minutes and he'd do really well. And the stat line would be like, ooh, I should pick him up for my fantasy team. And then the next night he got 5 minutes or a DNP. Or he'd get 30 minutes on back-to-back games, but that second game he had 3 points and 2 rebounds because it just, he's young, he's inconsistent. That wasn't the way it was going to go yet. So there's going to be a lot of eyeball test for me with those guys, and there's going to be a lot of eyeball test with this team to go, all right, we know Holmgren's not there. We know they've got kind of a massive chasm at center right now where it's going to be a rotating cast of people. It's going to be Jalen Williams. You're going to get some Mike Muscala in there because you got to have some veteran on this team. Jeremiah Robinson Earl is listed at the top of the depth chart. I don't think that's going to stick. Pokusevski, if he's put on any weight at all, and maybe even if he hasn't, they'll probably try out as a string bean center. It's going to be a rotating cast there. And then the rest of that group, I mean, Gideon and Gilgeous-Alexander are the starters, although Shai Gilgeous-Alexander has been rumored that there's some teams looking at him because, yeah, he's super young, but he's ready to go now. He is a all-star or near all-star player now, and that may not track if Oklahoma City is not ready to be contending yet or to be middling yet, and that's the problem. There were rumors about Lou Dort this offseason too. That's
my question for you then on the basis of this. Obviously, if Holmgren was healthy, it might make this a different question.
Yes.
But is this the last year of the tanking? Have we reached the spot where, is this the last year trying to get the top picks? Like, how many picks do they have left? I'm assuming they're, like they're going into the
36 picks. It's insanity.
So
nobody has more picks than they do.
It is they'll get many bites at the apple to try to get this right for swinging for the fences, which is why you said That's why you take Holmgren within it, because of what's still waiting with you. You need to take those swings if they actually want this to count for something other than a middling team. So that's there. But with if it's about the eye test, then how does Josh Giddey play into the question of, is this the last year of the tank, where after another season with the cap space that they have, with the arsenal picks, with the players that are now developing, is this the last year of the tank?
Yes. I think there's no way around it. And if I'm the Thunder, I try to be as good as I possibly can be this year already, even if it means 30, 35 wins and I miss the playoffs. Teach these young guys how to play together, how to win together. Let them take their lumps and get that first step on their NBA journey, even without Chet Holmgren, because you have so many other draft picks behind you that you can package together, you can mix and match. You got to figure out if Gilgeous Alexander is your starting backcourt of the future, and how Lou Dort fits into that. Can he be the small forward? Does he need to play shooting guard? Do you got an odd man out of those three? Is Darius Baisley your starter, or is it Pokusevski? Or does Pokusevski have the upside to maybe be your center, or in some type of rotation with Holmgren? Answer those questions by the end of the season, and on draft night next year, package whatever guys, you've got other prospects with some upside that could show out this year. Trey Mann, Theo Maledon, and Ty Jerome have all shown some things. Aaron Wiggins showed some things last year. Figure out what you have. Win as many games as you have. Build some buzz around this team. Do not prematurely shut guys down to chase that draft pick. Yeah, you could try to lose your way into the number one pick. And I know I'm blanking on the guy's name. I know that the number one pick this year is supposed to just be like the cat's meow, right? But he plays center. So does Chet Holmgren. You really want to do that on draft night? Trade 8 of your picks and Chet Holmgren and get him anyway. They've got the capital to do this. So I think the tank has got to be the last year of the tank, and maybe even the tank's got to be done, is what I'm really trying to say, I think.
So I'll have you jump ahead in the crystal ball at the end of this season, and we're getting near draft night or just looking at the offseason in general. Who is someone that you would target with this team, with the structure within it? Who is a veteran or a young player that you would be aggressive in using picks for to try to trade and start building a nucleus? Is there someone that you believe would be a great fit that would add to the nucleus and ending the tank and starting to make the big move towards being competitive?
To me, it's a front court player, unless you find out that Gideon and Gilgeous Alexander cannot play together, and that you've got an odd man out because Lou Dort has to be in your backcourt and you want to keep him because of his defensive prowess. He is a legit 3-and-D star in the making. So probably not the backcourt. It's probably your power forward spot, maybe your center, if you look at it and go, Holmgren's got the upside and nobody has seen him actually play, but they saw those little bit of flashes. We could package him together with some picks and bring in a star type of center. A Karl Anthony Towns, if Minnesota is disappointing and the Twin Towers type of thing doesn't work. There's gonna be other lone superstars, maybe not a Damian Lillard or De'Aaron Fox, because those are point guards. Again, unless it's point guard that you want. But there's going to be other near all-star guys that might be available. A Brandon Ingram in New Orleans, depending on how they pan out this year. A Pascal Siakam in Toronto. Los Angeles, the Clippers could blow things up at some point if they are unable to take that next step. The Bulls could begin to blow things up if this does not work as they wait on Lonzo Ball. There's going to be some good players available there if they can't make it to that next step. It's really hard to predict at this point. Charlotte could be a revolving door. Atlanta could really reshuffle the deck again if they flame out. Those are some teams that have got all-star caliber players. But I do think you can do this internally. And I think the guys you have are good enough. And there is, unlike Utah, I look at Oklahoma City and I do see a handful of potential multi-time all-stars in that development system. And I see the amount of draft capital to either package with a couple of those guys or just on its own to continue moving up the next few drafts to take those swings without having to tank to get there. And you can put yourself ahead of schedule where maybe with all that free agent money, all of a sudden you look really, really good and you get that young up and coming free agent who goes, yeah, I don't care that Oklahoma City has no nightlife. They're going to be real good, and I want to be a part of that. Like that, those guys are out there.
A lot of money.
Right. Those guys are out there. So that's what I hope for Oklahoma City. I do not pick them, unlike last year, to finish last in the division. And that's the segue as we end the show here. We're going to rank our teams from top to bottom of how we see the Northwest Division finishing. I've got Denver first, barely. Minnesota second. I'm going to give Utah third. Oklahoma City fourth, but just barely. I could flip-flop between Utah and Oklahoma City. The Thunder might be good enough to finish third in this division, depending on what Utah actually does. And I'm going to put Portland in that bottom spot, despite the fact I like the starting lineup and I like Damian Lillard. I do not think that is built to last. I think they have hedged their bets to give themselves enough just in case it all goes well to say they tried to put a good team around Dame. But there's so many ways that could go wrong. And when it does, it is not going to be pretty.
I'm going to go with Denver 1, Minnesota 2. I'm going to say Dame gets at least one more good hurrah. I'm going to give him third. I think that health, after things have been bad within it, health breaks right. For that, it still is an inevitable divorce that should be happening here and should have already happened. And they're not going to be any more than that 7th or 8th seed at best with everything breaking right. But then I have Utah and Oklahoma. But none of these teams are going to be easy W's moving forward.
Yeah, I don't think there's an unwatchable team in this division. And you can't always say that about every division. There's usually at least one team where you're like, nah, I'm not going to tune in. And last year it was Oklahoma City, where you had to be a little bit of a masochist or just a really big stand for young players. You love the G League type of prospect guys to be tuning into Thunder games. And I don't think you can say that. I think they're going to be entertaining. So there you have it. We've picked our division standings. Where do you think they're going to wind up? What did we get wrong? What did we get right? Would love to hear from you in the comments section. If you're wanting the video version, find us on YouTube. Like, share, subscribe. It's Basketball by Association. Ring that bell for us. If you want the audio-only version, Spreaker, Spotify, iTunes, anywhere you get your podcasts, that's where you get Basketball by Association. He's Dan Lewig. Thank you so much for coming on the show. We, of course, will have you again, Dan. I appreciate it. This has been the Rashard Lewis episode. I'm Joel Cordes. We'll get Archie Shea on here before too long as we look at the Atlantic Division, I believe, is coming up next. And they've got that New York Knicks team that we're going to be contractually obligated to talk about. And there you go, Archie Shea. I mentioned the Knicks on the episode. It happened. I'm going to go finish